Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of Speaking Steagles, the premier Pennsylvania pro football podcast. I am Nick Vete. He is Ricardo Martinez Paz, and we've got Steelers and Eagles football to talk about as we have Week 12. Their games play tomorrow. We got a little bit of a later podcast this week, working around the Thanksgiving holiday. So I hope everybody out there tuning in had a great Thanksgiving, enjoyed time with family, enjoyed food. Maybe made a little bit of money on the Thanksgiving football games. I didn't myself, but that's a different story. But all that being said, Ricardo, how are you doing, my friend? How's your Thanksgiving holiday?
Oh, dude, it was great. I mean, except for the part where I got way too full, and it was probably the most full I've ever gotten on Thanksgiving, if I'm being honest. So,
Really, you think that this year was the record breaker for you?
oh, dude, it was bad. I was humbled, and I woke up the next morning like I was still full. But
Uh
yeah, how
huh.
about you though?
That's that. You did it right when you're still full the next morning. Yeah,
It was
yeah.
bad, dude.
Dude, I mean, it's my favorite holiday, man. I go to town. I mean, if you can the biggest lock of like a Thanksgiving holiday bet is me going in for seconds. I mean, like
Oh, yes.
you're making your money on is Nick getting a third plate in there, and I did this year, so we sent it, and yeah, I was one of the lone family members going up there for third, but I still feel full today from that meal. So yeah, it was a great holiday, and I hope everybody tuning in or watching this whenever had a good Thanksgiving. And I guess we can kind of jump into the football because it's a pretty hectic time for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think that's where we'll start things off today. As following their loss to the Browns last Sunday, losing 13-10, the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mike Tomlin relieved Matt Canada of his duties as the offensive coordinator of this team. Tomlin saying in his press conference that the decision was fully his. And, I start to wonder a little bit. Maybe this is something that, Tomlin was worried about losing the locker room to a certain extent, as these losses kind of come in these, fashions, only scoring 10 points in the game, the offense really being abysmal. You start to wonder when players on that offensive side of the ball start to point the fingers, and specifically at Matt Canada. And maybe this is him trying to prevent the team from losing the locker room. And now it's going to be Eddie Faulkner, who is the new offensive coordinator, and Sullivan, the quarterback's coach, will be the play caller. He has experience doing that in the past. So that's the change that the Steelers made following this loss. And, the conversation was always more of a when rather than an if with Matt Canada. And, Mike Tomlin decides this is the time the team was going to move on.
Yeah, I mean, this was. I feel like that this past Sunday, it was really the low point for this offense. I mean, it was just rock bottom. Yeah, sure, it was against the Cleveland Browns, whose defense is one of the best in the league, but still, it just seemed like nothing worked on Sunday. And I mean, it was just, I mean, sure, like Kenny Pickett deserves some of that blame for sure, but play calling just, I mean, it's just been so I mean, consistently bad, really, throughout the entire season, and I mean, there's really no sugarcoating that. And it's one of those things where there was you talked about losing the locker room. Like there's certain
Yeah.
instances, George Pickens on the sideline or Deontay Johnson this past Sunday had to get separated from coaches, I believe, or someone separated from someone on the sidelines, and Najee Harris after the game, sort of his comments. And what was it that he said? It was something about relating to predictability and like whenever he's on the field, something along those lines.
Yeah.
So when players are starting to speak out about, especially on offense,
Yeah.
um, that's certainly. I mean, it was very clear, abundantly clear that they were not happy, they were not um, content with what was going on offensively. And so I
Yeah.
think this change made sense, even though we were kind of talking about this should have happened before the season. But there's arguments for both sides on that front. But I'm curious as to how you feel about this.
Well, I mean, the thing that kind of is crazy about it, this is really the first time I believe the Steelers have ever fired a coach in season. I mean, I know there was an instance back in like 1948 that a coach was let go, but I'm pretty sure I even heard something like the circumstances surrounding that was it was like the it was the head coach was like also in some sort of like a GM role as well, and he
Yeah.
basically fired himself to then bring somebody else in. I don't remember exactly the circumstances, but for all real intents and purposes, this is the first time the Steelers have ever let a coach go in season in this high capacity role. So the thing that it kind of points to me is the Steelers, clearly saw that Matt Canada wasn't getting the job done. Tomlin recognized that, but they've been such a loyal organization for so long, always giving their coaches and players the benefit of the doubt. They just realized this is so bad to a point that if we don't make a change, we're potentially, wasting an opportunity here to make the playoffs, potentially make a playoff run, wasting a year of the prime of TJ Watt and Minka Fitzpatrick and Alex Highsmith that, you could potentially make the playoffs and see what happens. That they were like, hey, this is a move that needs to be made. And it also kind of, then I think the next question becomes, well, what does this mean for Kenny Pickett? I think part of it means they believe that Kenny Pickett isn't as much of the problem as Matt Canada was, even though I'll talk about Kenny Pickett a little bit more later on. I think it also shows that they're kind of showing that, hey, while yes, we're an extremely loyal organization, the Rooney family, some of the best owners in all of professional sports, as far as it comes to, believing in their coaches and believing in the people they hire to coach their football team. It's also showing them, hey, like we recognize that this league is kind of changing and it's becoming a league that's very much driven on, what are you doing for me now? What are the results you're getting for me now? So I think it kind of turns all eyeballs on Kenny Pickett of, all right, now what do you do the rest of the season with the different play caller in place? The excuse of Matt Canada kind of goes out the window, and I think the spotlight is going to turn a lot more towards, Kenny Pickett and kind of how he performs the rest of the way.
Yeah, I'm just it fascinates me how this all kind of spiraled and then, eventually turned into this because I mean, you could say what you want about preseason. I mean, this past preseason, it was the sharpest Kenny Pickett looked and the most comfortable it seemed that he had looked under Matt Canada's offense. And I know there was one game where I think it was the backups playing, but still, it's like, getting those reps. Those are, I mean, players. There are a certain amount of players who will say that those reps are actually really important, building the rapport, the chemistry with players, receivers, offensive line. Getting all those nitty gritty details out, and it's just the how this kind of unfolded was I don't even know how this happened. It was just like
Yeah,
everything
man. I mean,
was
it's
so
a crazy
promising.
time. It's a crazy timeline of really how this progressed from how well they performed back last season, running the football and finishing, I think it was 7-2 in their last 9 games. Really, what saved Matt Canada's job, frankly. And then also combining that with the fact of Kenny Pickett going into his second year, you want to keep that longevity of him working with the offensive coordinator, to all of a sudden coming back this year, having the fantastic preseason, like you said, really thinking, perhaps a corner was turned with this team and with this offense, to all of a sudden being abysmal the first, 5-6 weeks of the season, to now, thinking, hey, maybe they turn the corner again, finding their offensive identity, which I still think they have to a certain degree. I think running the
Yeah,
football is still their offensive identity, but just really unable to do anything creative and productive as far as it comes to just utilizing these weapons in the passing attack and being able to convert on third downs and finishing in the red zone. I mean, Ricardo, in this game, the Steelers were man, I had this written down somewhere. They only had 12 first downs in this game, and they were 3 for 14 on third down.
yeah,
I mean, that's just putrid. That's not going to get the job done in this league. And I think Tomlin kind of echoed that in his press conference following the decision when he said along the lines, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, the results weren't rapid and good enough for what we need at this point. So
yeah, yeah.
this is ultimately the decision that comes from it. And man, this is kind of the way that I view it is they have a lot of generational players on their defense when it comes to TJ Watt and Minka Fitzpatrick and Alex Highsmith, who are all in their prime, and Cameron Hayward, even in the kind of the twilight of his career. You got to find a way to make the most of it. And you have these weapons on offense that can be utilized. So they need to find a way to get better results. And now we're going to see, when it comes to a different play caller and a different offensive coordinator, and obviously a different kind of mindset for game planning. If they can kind of still get to that 10-win mark and make the playoffs and all of a sudden, does Kenny Pickett perform better, or do we continue to see he's just as much
Yeah.
the problem? Because in my opinion, if we continue to see this poor accuracy from Kenny Pickett, bad decision making, trying to exit the pocket too early, all these things that he's also not doing well, I think the Steelers really need to kind of look themselves in the mirror and say, you know, is there something we can do at quarterback to give ourselves a better chance to win as well? Because they're wasting the prime and, these pivotal years of these career generational defensive players.
Yeah, the spotlight, I mean, and the pressure is really on Pickett now to deliver, and this is, I mean, honestly, like if he doesn't perform well, if he continues to play poorly, this I'm not gonna say it's over for him, but it's like you said, the Steelers are gonna have to consider other options at
You
the
know,
quarterback position.
I don't think it's that outlandish to say. I mean, again, this is all kind of speculation depending on how Pickett plays the rest of the way. But we really haven't seen him progress at all from where he was last year. If
Yeah,
anything, it's maybe a little bit of a regression because his accuracy is worse this year. I mean, if he continues to be a problem, I really think there's going to be, even though Trubisky's under contract next year as well, I don't think he's the answer. But I think it is going to be, a serious conversation of do they look to potentially the draft or some of these free agents that'll be available. I'm not saying a first round pick again, but just taking another quarterback, bringing another a QB into that room to, potentially compete for that job. Because yes, this is a roster that's, they've paid a lot of money to these players on defense, and they have a lot of talented players on offense as well. They've continued to try to rebuild this offensive line the past couple years with draft picks and signing free agents like Sayumalu and James Daniels to the point where, something's got to give. And, now the Steelers are admitting a change needs to be made at offensive coordinator. And now the spotlight is on Kenny Pickett.
yeah, for sure. I don't really have much else to add on that front, but
I don't
it's
have much more on Canada. I mean, the
yeah,
only, and the game, I feel like, we've kind of talked a lot. It was a lot of the play calling. I guess the one other thing from the game that I'll kind of say, there's a lot of talk about, how they were going to go about winning this game because it was a talented Browns defense. But the Steelers had an opportunity
yeah,
late, and this game was, close, a slugfest, low scoring. They had 3 drives in the fourth quarter. One of them was, in the start of the quarter, they opened up with the ball at the start of the fourth quarter. And, the talk has always been fourth quarter Kenny Pickett. He'll find a way to
yeah,
get the job done. Well, on that first drive of the fourth quarter, they were deep in Brown's territory. He tried to spin out of the pocket and make something happen, and he spun into a sack, which is a tendency that's a problem for him, rather than stepping up into the pocket and trying to find a receiver, just getting the ball away. So they had to settle for a field goal as a result of that. Second drive, had to punt while also in Brown's territory. They couldn't get just, deep enough into Brown's territory to, get a field goal opportunity for Boswell. And instead, I think they were at like the Browns 45. They had to punt. And then on their third drive of the fourth quarter, it was a 3 and out, had to punt. And then DTR went ahead and drove down the field and got the Browns into field goal range. And, I can't really blame the defense in this one because they continued to get the stops throughout the game. They did a solid job of preventing the Browns from moving the ball. And they even forced a turnover. This game was on the offense, and Matt Canada, whose job came at the expense of it, and ultimately Kenny Pickett to a degree as well.
yeah. This game was, I mean, the defense is they did exactly what they've been doing all season, and pretty much they actually didn't bend that much either. They actually had quite a few like stands and forced punts, but I mean,
Yeah,
they
no doubt.
did
And
their
I mean, they
job.
actually held the Browns running attack to under 100 yards.
Yeah,
And the Browns played a clean game too. They had just one penalty in this game and only the one turnover. So I
yeah,
mean, that's a pretty solid game for a rookie quarterback and a team that was just kind of this is the exact game plan the Browns wanted to go into. Don't beat
yeah,
themselves, keep it close, and try to make something happen in the fourth quarter with a rookie QB. And
yeah.
and and rely on their stout defense, and they ultimately came out on top. And for the first time, really, when the Steelers had an opportunity to win a game, a close game in the fourth quarter, they were unable to do so.
Yeah, and I mean the magic just ran out. I mean, I feel like we knew that this was unsustainable. Kind of going into
Without a
the
doubt,
fourth
without a
quarters like
doubt.
this, where it's like really narrow, and you're kind of expecting every single week for Kenny Pickett to save the team in the end, or maybe the defense standing on the literally the last drive. I mean, it's just it's really hard to win like that, and that for long periods of time too. That's it
Yeah.
ultimately, kind of went the other way, and I'm kind of surprised it hasn't happened like sooner than it did on Sunday.
Now, one thing I want to ask you about, I'll talk a little bit more about this game in stock up, stock down, but
Yeah,
I feel like something we have to, just bring up here too is even though the Steelers are moving on and it feels a little bit like the sky is falling, um, this is a team that still has a very legitimate chance at the playoffs, and their schedule, they have a lot of winnable games going forward, Ricardo. I mean, they're 6-4 right now. Let me just go through this real quick. And you tell me if it's reasonable to say, nothing's a gimme, but they have realistic opportunities to win football games here. This week, they're at Cincinnati. Jake Browning is going to be starting for the Bengals. I mean, very winnable game. Am I right?
yeah, I'd say so. Yeah,
The following week, at home against Arizona, they've looked better with Kyler Murray back, but also not a stout football team. Would you agree?
yeah, I agree.
Following that, it's against a New England Patriots team that's, got a lot of issues of their own, a lot of talk about, Bill Belichick being done there this season. Would you agree? Very winnable game.
Yes, absolutely.
And then the following week, we get into, mid-December at Indianapolis, solid football team, nothing special.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
that's
then
winnable.
again, home against Cincinnati, we just said, without Joe Burrow, it's a very winnable game. And then, in Seattle, excuse me, I may have just said Seattle, but I meant Cincinnati. No Joe Burrow. And then following that game in Seattle, Geno Smith, question marks about what they have there. Seattle's a tough environment. I also think that that's a game that could potentially be winnable as we see things kind of go down the road. So there's that gets us all the way through week 16 before their season finale against the Ravens. So they're going to have opportunities here to win 3-4 more games and get to 9 or 10 wins and still make the playoffs. So it's a matter of kind of regrouping through all of this, taking this coordinator change and saying, hey, we've got a lot of good aspects going for us, and still kind of keep their focus on the playoffs, because this is a team that I think absolutely could still make the postseason.
Yeah, they definitely can, especially with the defense they have, the playmakers they have, and how many, I mean, the turnovers they produce. And yeah, going back to that run identity, run first offense, that's their bread and butter. It's typical
Yeah.
Steelers football. If they can keep doing that, if they can figure out how to do that more consistently each and every week, then I think every game is certainly every game except maybe the Seattle one's winnable. And um, yeah, I mean this is a tough team. This is Mike Tomlin. I mean, any team coached by Mike Tomlin is always going to be in it. So
Yeah.
um,
So
they're tough.
I'll talk a little bit more about this game and stock up, stock down. The game
Yeah.
specifically, the loss to the Browns, just as we talk about some of those players. But Ricardo, I mean, what a big victory for the Eagles against. I mean, not even big so much as standings or anything like that. But I
Yeah.
mean, how good did it feel to get that revenge in the Super Bowl rematch against the Chiefs and pick up a victory against Patrick Mahomes and former Eagles coach Andy Reid?
Okay, let me tell you the immediate feeling I had after the game. So I was watching
Excuse
my
me while I just plug in my charger here if I'm
oh
just
yeah, please.
looking all around.
So I was watching with my brother after the game ended. We're both just sitting there like that didn't feel like a win,
Uh-huh.
but kind of slept on it and thought about it a bit more. I was like, wow, we just like I kind of didn't even think about this avenging the Super Bowl last. Sure, that was the narrative, whatever, but what I thought was more impressive. Andy Reid, I said this last week. Andy Reid had never lost to the Eagles prior to Monday night. Coming off of buys, Andy Reid has only lost 3 games in his how many years of head coach?
Which
24
is
years.
which is insane. I mean, this dude's
Yeah,
been around for, almost 2 decades, I believe.
exactly. What was this other stat? I mean, this is the first time Jason Kelsey beat Travis Kelsey, and I think in like 3 or 4 tries. Um, and this was an offense that was, I believe, they're the sixth highest scoring team. Or sorry, no, they're the fourth best team on third down. And I mean, they're just a machine. You just beat Mahomes, like that's at home in Arrowhead. You know how hard that is for anyone to do. I mean, it's not. It's even if it wasn't pretty, you
You
still
you
got
could make the
got
case
done.
now that's the hardest environment to play in
Yes.
in the NFL and maybe professional sports.
Oh, it's I mean, what was the one poll that came out that the best NFL
Yes.
stadium or best
The
atmosphere?
Athletic had that poll of the best, best it was like worst stadium, best stadium, coach you
Yeah,
most wanna play for, which was actually Mike Tomlin, by the way.
yes, it
But
was.
the stadium that was voted, best stadium or best
Best
stadium to
stadium.
play in was Kansas City Arrowhead.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's just all those layers at least, like, that's so, impressive, it's almost it felt, like, improbable that and I said this was a game, the Eagles could very much lose because of, how well this defense was playing coming into the game, and they really did for 2.5 quarters. The Eagles offense really had no answer. I mean, they didn't get a first down until, like, midway through or sorry, they didn't convert a third down until the like midway through the third quarter. Do you know how crazy? No team had done that going into. I mean, in any game this season against the Eagles, like that's how well this team was playing, and defensively. I mean, they had 4 sacks in the second quarter alone of Jalen Hurts. I mean, they were all over the Eagles' offense. The offensive line couldn't pick up blitzes. The Steve Spagnuolo was calling a really, really good game for this defense.
Yeah.
It was I mean, and also the conditions were, I mean, it was rainy, it was,
Yeah.
really like messy. And so for the Eagles to have, kind of they woke up eventually and to actually, stay in the game. I thought there were several instances I thought this game was over. Especially in the red zone. The one turning point I think for me was for the Travis Kelsey fumble, Bradley Roby punching it out, having him back was huge. Let me just say
Yeah.
that instead of having Sidney Brown or um, Eli Ricks on Travis Kelsey or something like that, like
Yeah.
that was huge to have him Bradley Roby back. I mean, just to
Yeah.
see. And Byard had an interception earlier in the
I
game.
was gonna say I thought Byard and Roby did a good job on kind of containing Travis Kelsey. Even though he got the touchdown, it felt like he didn't
Yeah,
have a normal Kelsey game where he kind of took over.
yeah, and that's exactly what the Eagles had to do. And then they double, triple teamed him a lot of the night. But I just want to say that this none of this was possible without DeAndre Swift. On the 3 touchdown drives, he had at least one play of I believe it was 20 yards on each of those drives that they scored a touchdown. There was one screen that went for 20 yards. There was one run that went for 35 yards. There was another run that went for I think 25 yards that all set the Eagles up for the Reds. I mean, scoring those touchdowns that they had. But I do have to give credit to Brian Johnson, Nick Sirianni, the offensive staff, even though they were struggling offensively through those 2.5 quarters. They eventually figured it out. They were definitely more creative in terms of the personnel they used. My favorite, personally, I just love saying it. The pony set, the 2 running back sets. Those are. I mean, they don't use them very often, but when they do, they pick up so many yards. It's like at least 7 or 8 yards every time they've used it. Just from watching, I'm just like, wow, why don't they do that more often? They did it a few times. There was one end around that went for a long gain. DeAndre Swift had. So that creative part of it certainly helps, open up the offense and made Jalen Hurts a bit more comfortable, a bit more confident, and kind of surprised the Chiefs defense at times. So, I mean, obviously that huge 41-yard completion to Devontae Smith uh,
Yeah.
to eventually take the lead was huge. AJ Brown was shut out the entire game, and for them to still somehow get Devontae Smith involved, get the running backs involved, and it's just they really had to work for it. They really had to grind it out. So I'm gonna give credit to them, even if it was ugly at first. But I don't care what the stats say. You know what? Like Jalen Hurts just keeps finding ways to win. It's just
That's
it's
that's what
just
you have to love about this team, man. And I mean, Jalen Hurts even said it after the game in his quick sideline interview following the win. I don't remember who it was that was asking. Maybe it was I don't remember who the sideline reporter was, but he basically said, this team just continues to find ways to win and gut out victories. And he even said we have yet to play our best football, which is something we've been talking about. And the fact that that's scary for the rest of this league, that this Eagles team is finding ways to get the job done, and they're not even playing as good as, on paper they could potentially be playing. And,
yeah,
you know, for them to still be in that, I think that's a sign of good coaching. I think that's a sign of just there's probably a better word to describe it, but just like unity among this group that, no matter what the circumstances are, they'll find a way to get it done. And it's kind of an unlike when you look and really dive into how they've won these football games, it's unlikely that they, only have one loss on the season. But man, props to this team and this coaching staff for finding ways to get it done. And you said it too. I mean, Spagnuolo called a good game defensively and, kind of took AJ Brown out of it for a bit and, still getting the job done. And, whether it was DeAndre Swift or the big throw down the field to Devontae Smith. I mean, this team, they're showing some real guts and some real grits in every victory that they pull off winning in this style.
Let me just give you some stats to back Jalen Hurts up, right? So he's won 13 straight regular season games against teams above 500, which broke a tie with Peyton Manning and Vinny Testaverde. He's won 7 straight games when trailing by 10 points or more, which is the most by any QB since that stat was created in 1991.
Which that's
No,
crazy. So you're saying anytime they're losing by 10, he's been finding a way to come back and win.
He's had the highest passer rating when down, when trailing at this season. And no QB, no QB had won 4 straight, which is crazy to think about when trailing by 10 points. Not even Mahomes has done that. So again, that's just, it's sort of a, never say die mentality. The Eagles will just make you play the full 60 minutes. Like there's no, they will capitalize on the mistakes, on the opportunities they get, which they certainly got a few, and ultimately the defense held in the end. And so, it's as ugly as it was. We've been saying that a lot this season. There have been some really ugly wins. They easily could have lost to the Cowboys, Commanders, like probably twice on that front. But they certainly could have lost this game too. But
and I mean, I think you put it in good perspective, where it's like when you think about all of the different aspects that went into reasons why the Eagles, should have lost this game, whether it's or not reasons, but like things that kind of work against them, whether it's Andy Reid's success off the bye, the challenges of playing in Arrowhead, the bad weather, just beating, Patrick Mahomes. There's so many difficulties that went into this, and they just found a way to get it done. So I get what you mean when you slept on it, and the next day you kind of realize, hey, this was still impressive. That even though it didn't look great and it wasn't a high flying, 35-20 victory or something like that, like they got a W in this league, and it was against arguably the best team in the AFC.
Yeah, so I mean, we're not going to apologize for being 9-1. Like that, that's kind of taking a page out of Mike Tomlin saying, not apologizing for winning, sort of thing, and that's exactly what the Eagles. So
Absolutely,
that's again another huge. I mean, and you think about it too. The Lions. I mean, every single team that was, the Cowboys, they won their game. The Lions won their game Sunday. The Niners won their game. So there was even more pressure for the Eagles to win because it won. I mean, I'm sure all 3 of those teams thought when it was 17-7, all right, we're going to have, a chance to catch up. And they just didn't. The Eagles didn't let that happen.
I mean, I'm not going to lie, Ricardo. I was sitting there at halftime thinking, man, this is going to be tough. Not necessarily because I didn't think that the Eagles offense could get back into it and Jalen Hurts could try to manufacture a comeback. I was thinking, man, like even if Jalen Hurts is able to kind of get this team close, I didn't think they'd be able to overtake them. But the Eagles defense also pitched a shutout in the second half, which I think is so huge. The fact that the defense was able to come up that big and just keep Mahomes and the offense from, generating more points to just, make the comeback almost not feasible. They did their part, man, and it was incredibly impressive.
Yeah, I mean that I was actually going to say that too. I was like, that was the one point I forgot, that the defense pitched a shutout in the second half. And I mean, sure, that's 3 straight games the Chiefs haven't scored in the second half, but still, you got to give credit for Sean Desai.
No doubt.
Sure.
Which I'm actually, the fact that you bring that up, I didn't even realize that. I mean, that's a bigger conversation for the Chiefs, the fact that they haven't been able to. But either way, you can't take that away from the Eagles.
Listen, there were some drops that helped the Eagles. There's no question about that.
Yes, but I mean, you can't talk about, kind of the end of this game without bringing up, that fact about the MVS drop. And, I think it was 3 drops on that final drive. But again, you don't apologize for the other team making mistakes.
exactly.
The Eagles made those plays when it counted most.
I was about to say that the Eagles made those plays. The Chiefs did not, and that's on them. So we're not apologizing for that either.
Yeah.
That's all I have with regard to
I
this
I
game.
think that's the perfect way to end it. No, enough said. Enough said.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, man. That's good stuff, and we'll kind of revisit this game right now in stock up, stock down. But we'll start with the Steelers again. It's odd because even though the Steelers lost this game, I have 3 stock ups and 1 stock down. So
Oh,
again, I think
okay.
this just kind of shows you more. Like it's easy to pin the blame on Matt Canada. And I guess I'll start with stock down. Kenny Pickett, who was my 1 stock down this week, because yes, even though Matt Canada was the one who took the fall for this loss in this struggling offense, in this game, Kenny Pickett, completed just 53% of his passes for
Yeah.
106 yards, and he also took 3 sacks. One of which could have been a safety, the Myles Garrett play on the opening drive, which that really wasn't even his fault. I mean, Dan Moore just got beat on that left side.
Yeah.
But again, I think it's been an issue for Pickett that, something that I applauded him so much for last year compared to Mitch Trubisky was his ability to step up in the pocket and deliver the throws he needed to make. This year, for whatever reason, he's not doing that. He's spinning out of the pocket and trying to scramble away. And it's so frustrating. You know the play that I'm talking about when he does that
Yes.
kind of spin and he tries to get out of it, and then there's
Yep.
someone there waiting for him. That may have worked in college. It's not been working for him in the NFL this season. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's that combined with the accuracy being worse this year. He has the fourth worst QBR of any quarterback this season, behind only Tannehill, Zach Wilson, and Bryce Young. And he also has a 60.5 completion percentage on the field, which is only Jordan Love, Matthew Stafford, and Zach Wilson are worse among quarterbacks with at least 9 games played. So the
Yeah.
accuracy has been bad. And this was kind of the first game where he didn't get it done in the fourth quarter the way that he had been in the past. So
Yeah.
even though it's Matt Canada that ultimately took the fall, the spotlight is now on Kenny Pickett to be better with the new play caller and new offensive coordinator.
Yeah. I will say pass protection was an absolute disaster most of the game. I mean, then again, going up against Miles Garrett, felt like every single snap, Kenny Pickett dropped back on, and he was always pressured. So that's
Yeah,
probably part of the reason, we've never really felt comfortable and felt the need to spin out of pressure. But he's also had that tendency most of the season, as you kind of pointed out. But um, yeah, so definitely more attention to Kenny Pickett now that Canada's gone. So
absolutely. Um, so I'll go into my stock up, and 2 guys I just want to kind of run right through. Cameron Hayward, having him back, the run defense is definitely so much better with him. I mean, I
yes,
think they've jumped up as far as just team stats against the run. They've jumped up like 4 spots in just a couple of weeks he's been back. And in this game, they held the Browns, who really rely on their run game, to just 96 total yards on the ground. My other stock up I want to, say real quick is Landon Roberts. He had 15 total tackles in this game. He played
yeah,
all 75 defensive snaps. He's stepping up. He's not the greatest player in coverage, but he's stepping up. He's wearing the green dot. He's out on the field, a ton. So he's got an expanded role, and the Steelers are going to need a lot out of him moving forward. So he gets a stock up along with Cam Hayward in this game.
I'm surprised you didn't give one to Jalen Warren. Well,
Well,
maybe
I
not.
have
Maybe
3. I wanted to say those 2, and then I was going to
not.
spend a
Okay,
little bit more
sorry,
time
sorry,
on Jalen
sorry,
Warren. Well, let
sorry.
me
I
let me
jumped the
say
gun
let me
there.
say it right here. Let me say it right here. Jalen Warren in this game, you know the numbers: 9 carries, 129 yards, 1 TD, and 16 receiving yards. Now, Ricardo, during the preseason, I kind of alluded to something with Jalen Warren, a take that I had with him, but I wanted to save it until we got into the season a little bit to see how things kind of went.
Yeah,
I'm ready to unleash this take now. I wasn't, at the start of the season because the Steelers weren't running the ball well. But tell me if this is crazy. The way that Jalen Warren is playing football for the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, and how dynamic he looks on the field, how much energy he brings to this offense. Is Jalen Warren the Austin Eckler to Najee Harris's Melvin Gordon when it was at that stage of Austin Eckler's career?
ooh, I
Both
mean,
Jalen Warren and Austin Eckler, undrafted free
yeah,
agents who
yeah,
started their career behind a mid first round pick.
yep.
And were their kind of number 2 for a number of years before finally overtaking that first round pick and kind of becoming the guy in their offense. Now, it's still in the early stages of that, but Is Jalen Warren to Najee Harris what Austin Eckler was to Melvin Gordon?
Whew, I mean, when you put that context around it, I would say so. The circumstances are certainly similar. I think so, yeah. And also, he's been the best player offensively the entire season. So I don't think
You
that's
know, and
outrageous
that's
at all.
Ricardo, that's saying something in and of itself. You know, when you think about the weapons that they have on the outside and, Najee Harris, the first round pick, and, I honestly can't even disagree with you there. He's been their most reliable and he provides the biggest spark.
Yeah, he does. I mean, he's so dynamic. He's so explosive. He just runs with juice. Like he's very like he might not be that tall, but that dude will run through anyone. Like it's fun to watch him play and just run and he's a really good player.
Well, that was the comparison that I kind of wanted to draw on with these two guys. And now going forward, I mean, let's see. It's going to be fun to see now that I've kind of put that out there into the ether of that comparison, how his career kind of pans out going forward. But he had a hell of a game in this one, man. He had that long run that he broke, that really kept the Steelers in it, man. I mean, if he doesn't break that run, I think it was like a 60-yard run or something like that. I mean, this Steelers team, you know, we're talking about like a 10-3 loss if he doesn't break that run. So
Yeah, no,
obviously, you don't
exactly.
know how the game also might have gone from there on out. But yeah, he was definitely the really, I guess, the one biggest bright spot on the Steelers offense.
Yeah, he only got 9 carries, which is the thing that bugs me about that, but, what can you do? The game's over now, but they need to
Yeah.
feed him more, man. They need to
I
give him
mean,
the
part of the
touch.
problem too, man, it's like I said earlier, they were 3 for 14 on third down. They're just not staying on the field to give
Yeah,
him more carries. I mean, it's not like Najee Harris. I think Harris had like 12 in this game. I could be wrong. I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head. But
yeah,
yeah, man, I mean, his split is definitely starting to be more even with Najee Harris. And it
yeah,
wouldn't surprise me if he it's going to take balls because Tomlin loves Najee Harris, but I wouldn't shock me if he overtakes Najee Harris,
no,
at some point here as far as just touches and carries out of the backfield. So
yeah,
Steelers got a diamond in the rough with that one.
for
Uh,
sure.
Kind of reminds me of Willie Parker, who was a former undrafted free agent of the Steelers as well, that turned into a real fan favorite and real kind of staple of the Steelers for a number of years. So he's a stock up this week, and yeah, he's been playing great football.
Yeah, no, definitely.
All right, let's turn it to the Eagles. Stock up, stock down.
Okay, I kind of already alluded to these 2 players, talked about them a bit. I'll say actually, should I start with stock up or start stock down first?
I'll let you decide, Ricardo. Whatever your heart is content with.
You started with stock down, so I think I'm gonna do that too.
All right.
Um, so I'll go the first one, kind of pass protection. Um, I did sort of talk about that. They allowed 5 sacks total, 4 in the second quarter. I mean, they just were struggling to pick up blitzes, and I mean, Chris Jones was wreaking havoc the entirety of that quarter. It was just
What
they couldn't get anything going.
one of
So
those was funny where it was they even I think Troy Aikman recognized it on the broadcast where Lane Johnson literally let Chris Jones go by because it was supposed to be a screen,
that
but it just got
screen
kind of
blown
blown
up.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's credit to the defense, but like still, I mean, it was a long first. I mean, 2.5 quarters for the offensive line. I guess I'll also kind of put in any of the tight ends really that were involved. Not really, they weren't really involved in this game. They had 3 tight ends. I mean, Grant Calcaterra got hurt, and he's not playing this weekend. So that's already, and he didn't get a single target. The only one who did was Jack Stoll. It was a one catch for 3 yards, and that was it. Albert Benham, I forget
Your
his
boy
name.
Albert.
Yeah, our boy Albert here. Also just didn't. Yeah, I think he only got like 10 snaps. So I mean, Dallas Goddard were there. We wouldn't be talking about this, and I'm sure Goddard would have had way more, at least 4 or 5 targets, if not more, and a couple catches. But I texted you this. I'm like, yeah, we really missed Dallas Goddard, and I knew we were going to. He
No
just
doubt, man.
adds a different element to this offense, and
The Eagles
they.
have nothing at tight end without Dallas Goddard. I
And I
mean,
know it's
I mean,
bad.
there's some, I guess it could be worse as far as just like blocking,
Right.
blocking in the run
Right.
game goes. But I mean, as far as adding a dynamic layer to the offense, I mean, it's pretty putrid.
Yeah, that it's a huge drop off. But my sort of my last dog down is the run defense. I'm not really sure what happened, but there was a lack of discipline. I mean, Hassan Reddick, Josh Sweat. There were a few instances where they kind of went upfield too quickly and didn't seal the edge. Allowed a few big runs to Isaiah Pacheco. And this was a unit. I mean, they still lead the league in rush defense, but they hadn't allowed. I mean, on average, they allowed, I believe it was 69 rush yards per game, which was the fewest in the NFL. In this game alone, they allowed 168, and I think it was like 80 of those were within the first two quarters. So maybe it was just a one-off for them.
Yeah,
Uh,
that was a little bit surprising because
yeah,
that's where you thought. I mean, I think I even said previewing this game, it's like, can they make the Chiefs a little bit one-dimensional by stopping the run game? But they really kind of weren't able to take that away early on.
yeah, and I think they did in the second half. They certainly were more disciplined then, but still to have allowed this much in the first half is slightly concerning. But maybe again, like I said, it was just a one-off, and the Chiefs' interior line is definitely their strong suit. They're one of the best on the inside, so maybe just I'm not going to panic on that, but it certainly wasn't a good outing for the front seven on that
Yeah.
front. But I'll move it over to stock up, and I already said these two players, DeAndre Swift and Devontae Smith. Though I mean, they made such huge plays when they mattered most. Like I said before, three big chunk plays from DeAndre Swift that ultimately set up all three touchdowns. Devontae Smith's his 41-yard catch on that, and he also had a big third down conversion. Skinny Batman kind of stepped up when it mattered most. AJ Brown only one catch in the night, so he still hasn't hit. For some reason, he got 99 yards again. I think they were AJ Brown and Devontae Smith were laughing about that after. He's like, you just can't get 100 for some reason, but yes, no, but Devontae Smith, man, he's still showing why he's a really good receiver, So
Absolutely. And I mean, that's something that we always talked about, I feel like, with these two guys is it's like, yeah, AJ Brown was having those crazy games, but it so easily could be, Devontae Smith who's the focal point on any given, Sunday. That,
yeah,
he's the one that's actually, kind of loading the box score, and it's the other guy who's drawing more of the attention from the defense or whatnot. So,
yeah,
um, both of them just such a dynamic duo at the wide receiver position.
yeah. It's fun to watch, man.
Yeah. So, that being said, let's get into week 12. These games tomorrow because we have the little bit later episode this week. And I guess I'll start talking a little bit about this matchup against the Bengals, the Steelers in Cincinnati. I think a lot of the conversation so much has been just with Matt Canada, now not there, and the new play caller and Sullivan and everything like that. And Eddie Faulkner is going to be putting the game plan together. But, this is compared to how I was feeling about this game, just 2 weeks ago with Joe Burrow and the Bengals trying to get back into the playoff race versus how I feel now with Burrow out for the season and Jake Browning at quarterback for the Bengals. I mean, I kind of feel similar to how I felt going into the Browns game, where you've got an inexperienced quarterback that's trying to lead this team, probably trying to play a similar type of game plan where it's, keep the thing close and see if you can't kind of pull ahead or get a big score late in the fourth quarter. So, I think it's got to be a similar kind of game plan on defense is, put pressure on the quarterback, try to force Browning into mistakes and just kind of try to limit the, offensive attack of the Bengals as much as you can. They've still got some dynamic wide receivers. I don't know if T. Higgins is going to be back or not, but,
I believe he's out.
you believe he's out. Yeah. So, I
Yeah,
mean, Jamar Chase is still there. Tyler Boyd is nothing to snuff at. So, but still, I mean, it's like there's no excuse. You should be able to, make life hard on Jake Browning and not let
yeah,
him, move the ball down the field.
yeah, exactly. And the other thing that's kind of in the Steelers' favor is the Bengals are second worst in running the ball, so they kind of
Yeah.
make themselves one dimensional. So I mean, I'm not to say they don't have to worry about that, but it's certainly something that's unlike the Browns. The Browns are very run heavy, so the Bengals are total
Yeah.
opposite. that. So
It is the complete opposite, and I mean, the Steelers had a good game against the run last week. I don't think there's any reason that that shouldn't be a similar
yeah,
kind of storyline for this week. I mean, I'd imagine that they'll have, similar success in that department. And I mean, the other thing they have going for them too is the Bengals defense is not the Browns defense.
yeah, that's true.
They give up the third most yards per game in the NFL, and they, more specifically against the run, they also give up the third most yards per game against the
Yeah,
opposing team's rushing attack. So, get the ball to Jalen Warren, get the ball to Najee Harris, and try to control the game, man. Try to just, keep the sticks moving. They got to be better, converting on third down and getting, the ball into opponent territory and just getting points on the board, frankly. I mean, I think
yeah,
that's the biggest point. The biggest thing is, take points, as often as you can, even if that's settling for field goals, get points on the board because I think that, it's going to be tough for the Bengals to score points and manufacture offense in this game.
yeah. I mean, it's so. I didn't think I mean, like the Bengals have talent on defense. For some reason, it just hasn't come together. I know they've had injuries, but they've been quite underwhelming considering they were, I think, a top 10 unit last year. So,
And I
um,
expected them to take strides this year for
yeah,
sure on defense. And,
yeah,
and yeah,
same.
it hasn't come together. But Ricardo, I mean, everything feels like it points in the direction that the Steelers should be able to win this game.
Yeah, it does. It
There-
doesn't matter if
it-
it's on the road or
even
not.
even outside of the quarterback situation, it doesn't feel like the Bengals really have an overwhelming advantage somewhere. And I mean, even in the spots they do, I mean, Mike Hilton's a really talented slot corner, but the Steelers don't really utilize the middle of the field and Pat
Yeah,
Fryermuth or Allen Robinson that much. So
right.
even in that department, I think the Steelers just have a lot going for them. And then you throw on top of the fact you have Jake Browning, who extremely inexperienced. I think the Steelers should be able to get the job done in this game.
They should. I mean, there's really no reason they shouldn't, like you just laid out. So,
There's the aspect of the tough home field advantage, but even that, I mean, it's like the Steelers. You got to get a win, and it'd be nice to see him bounce back in the first game with the new offensive coordinator after that awful loss last week to get back in the win column this week against a division rival.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
So let's talk about the Eagles game this week, and then we'll circle back around to predictions and everything like that. But Eagles at home taking on the Bills. What do you have for this matchup?
Oof, this is gonna be, this is one of those games where I'm scared it's gonna be a not a trap game necessarily, but you're just
That's what
coming
people are
up.
saying, though.
I know, I know. Yeah,
Experts and pundits out there are talking trap game after the big win, and
exactly.
Bills kind of finding their footing a little bit after firing Ken Dorsey.
I'm just gonna say, listen, that was against the Jets, and they're for as good as their defense has been, they were on the field way too long against the Bills because the offense was absolute garbage. So let's just get that out of the way. I think Stephen A. said this too that the Bills had a bye basically. So I kind of agree with that. But it's it's still Josh Allen. They still have a lot of weapons, and I might argue they're better in terms of the weapons they have this year than last. Um, Stephon Diggs. I mean, James Cook is also a really good running back.
Yeah,
Sure, he has his fumble issues, but outside of that, really good running back. Who else do they have? They have Shakir. They have Gabe Davis still, who can both
yeah.
those guys can break big
Dalton
plays.
Kincaid, the rookie
I was
tight end,
gonna
has
say,
really
yeah,
come on recently. Yeah,
yeah, and that's like I've been saying, the Eagles' weakness is defending against tight ends. So I feel like he's going to get involved. So defensively, it's really bend don't break. Like I don't know. Like I just think the Bills are going to get yards. It's really a matter of whether or not they can keep them out of the end zone and limit them to field goals. I mean, they just have so many weapons to choose from. You might take Stephon Diggs out of the game, or that might be your game plan. But then you leave the other three, the running back, and the Eagles also struggle defending against running backs, when they're throwing the ball. So I mean, it's going to be really tough, and I'm really curious to see how Sean Desai, makes a game plan for this because they just have so many weapons. And Josh Allen, like even if he is turnover prone, he still has one of the biggest arms, one of the most. I mean, he's just as a runner too. I'd even say that he's also, I
yeah.
mean, dangerous with his legs. So, and I feel like at times this season the Eagles have had their struggles with mobile quarterbacks. So, um, man, bend don't break is just what I'm gonna ride with really for this game.
Yeah, I'm interested to see. Do you think Darius Slay is just going to kind of trail Stephon Diggs all over the field wherever he goes?
I want him to, but that's I feel like not usually how Sean Desai goes about calling defenses. It's usually him on one side and James Bradbury the other. So,
Yeah,
um, but he is. I will say this: Sean Desai is willing to try things. He's will not like Jonathan Gannon was kind of like yeah he was good in his own right, but he was kind of stubborn in the way he called his defenses. Like whatever works worked, but and sometimes he wouldn't try and mix things up when things were going wrong. But Sean Desai, he will literally give you different coverages. He will try something even if it's unconventional. And so I like that a lot about him. And I mean, like he'll make adjustments on the fly as you kind of saw against the Chiefs. So um, man, it's gonna be tough though. I'm sure he's gonna. There are plenty of matchups across the board, but
yeah.
oof,
Well, two
yeah,
two interesting stats I also just want to point out. I mean, well, the first one's not really a stat, but you kind of touched on it. I think the turnover, differential is going to be a big thing in this one because, like you said, Josh Allen thrown a ton of interceptions, and this Bills team is kind of prone to the turnovers. And we've also seen the Eagles at times kind of end up, turning the ball over. So I think which team can protect the ball is going to be huge in this game. Also, something both of these teams are first and second and third down efficiency this season.
yep,
So which kind of defense is able to get a critical stop on third downs or kind of win that battle, I think could also be something that we kind of have to it could be a storyline as things kind of unfold.
yeah. Um, Man, it's this has like shootout written all over it. So offensively, I think you're gonna just have to win a track meet. I mean, but we've seen the Eagles, they're able to do this, and I mean the Bills defense is a top 10 unit in the league, and it's gonna be tough. I'm sure they're gonna probably try and take AJ Brown out of the game or limit him to some capacity, and make Devontae Smith win it. But I think the biggest strength for the Eagles has to be the run game again. It looked revitalized against the Chiefs, especially on some of those more creative calls like the end arounds, the two running back sets, or even having Devontae Smith in the backfield and flanking him out in the flat. Um, you just got to kind of build off the creativity and keep the defense guessing because they're second in the league in sacks. So running the ball for one will, try and you can at least try and make them hesitate and guess a bit more with how they want to attack their offensive tackles. But man, it's I feel like this is such an even game, and I'm going to say Kelly Green uniforms. That those are coming back this week, which is going to be sick.
I did
Um,
not realize that. Let's go, man. Let's go.
Dude, I'm so excited for that. But man, it's you also got to find a way to work the middle of the field a bit better with your tight end. I don't know. Throw Julio Jones in at tight end. Like, try something. Like, they can't just be working the outside or like outside the numbers. Like I know Devontae. There were a few plays where they did work inside the numbers, but it's got to be more of that. You've got to get the tight ends involved more somehow in some capacity. Like seriously, that you can't keep relying on just Devontae Smith and AJ Brown. So um, you got to be creative, but I would say prioritize running the ball. And we did see at times Jalen Hurts using his legs a bit, so maybe his knee is feeling a bit better. So
Mhm.
if you can use him on maybe a couple plays here and there, um, and keeping the defense honest, and that certainly adds another element, makes this offense even harder to stop. But again, I think it's going to be a track meet. So
Well,
um,
I'm curious what your prediction is for this game now, and unless you have anything else to add, I think let's get into it. And I mean, we could start with the Eagles here if you want to, give us kind of what you think the score of the game is going to be.
so I'm going to say 27-24 Eagles. What's the line? Is it -3 still? I
The line is
don't.
-3, so that would be a push. So you have what is it?
27-24.
27-24. And last week, just for reference, I had the Eagles beating the Chiefs 28-25. Ricardo, you had the reverse psychology, 27-24 Chiefs. And ultimately the Eagles won 21-17. So This week you're going with the same score, 27-24, but with the Eagles on top.
Yeah, it just for some reason has high scoring written all over it to me. I don't know. I felt the I don't know. Usually when I have this feeling, I'm like right because last week I was like this might be low scoring when I said that, but my prediction was way higher scoring than I actually thought it was going to be. So I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well, I'm kind of in a similar vein to you. I have the Eagles covering. I have it at 24-20, so somewhat high scoring, but nothing like I don't know if I'd go to a track meet necessarily for that score prediction, but I do
Yeah,
think there's going to be points in this game. I think we're going to see a lot of like high flying, kind of stuff. I could see some turnovers in this game, but I think the Eagles, man, they just find ways to win, and I'm going to keep rolling with them until proven otherwise.
yeah,
Um, let's talk about the Steelers then. They're -1.5 favorites at Cincinnati. So they are getting the points there. Let me just double check that. Yeah, so they were -1.5. I think the odds may have actually just shifted to -2.5, but we'll take it at 1.5 because that's what it was this morning.
yeah,
Um, I'm gonna go either way. I think they're covering. I have
yeah,
them winning 19-13. I don't think it's gonna be, an offensive. I don't see the Steelers offense all of a sudden flipping a script and scoring a bunch of touchdowns and stuff like that. But I do think we're gonna see them, play inspired football and get the win after their coach was fired last week and try to right the ship here. So I think they get a touchdown, maybe a couple Chris Boswell field goals, and I think for the most part they hold the Bengals and Jake Browning in check. So I'm going to go 19-13.
Man, I literally picked 18-13 because I was like, the Steelers are gonna get like, or they're gonna fail to get a 2 point conversion on one of those. But I'm gonna stick with it. I don't care. I'm gonna go with 18-13. Yeah,
Hell
we'll
yeah,
take.
man. Hey, maybe we'll both be dead on, man. I'd be happy for that one. So sounds good. We both have the Steelers covering and winning this game as as well as the Eagles both expecting a win. So we will see if that comes to fruition here. But we will be back in a few days now at this point with the games being tomorrow. Ricardo, you have any final thoughts before we close things out?
Um, Go Birds, go Steelers. Let's hope our teams get the win.
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. And Kelly Green uniforms to look forward to, man. That fires
Hell
me up
yeah.
now that those are gonna be back. So sounds good, man. You enjoy the rest of your weekend. Everybody, you enjoy your weekend as well, and hopefully we got some wins to break down in a couple days here. All right, everybody. Peace out. Bye-bye.